Alright, so welcome back to another video on the channel. So in this video, I work on building some pathways, I do a bit of fishing, and begin to build some bridges to the other parts of this world. But before I go to the main topic, I want to first of all, thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. Like, that's an incredible achievement. I'm really proud of that. Like, I want to make a separate video on that this coming week, so I'll keep that part short for now. And also, the last video about AI slop, like, it absolutely, like, blew up compared to the size of the channel. So it's clear a lot of people share a sentiment, and I'm really thankful for that. And the overwhelming response towards that video had me thinking. So in that video, it talked about how the AI bubble is collapsing and how the hype is dying and how the big tech giants are realizing that the return on investment just isn't there and they're panicking. But then I thought today I didn't exactly talk about what comes next, because if there's one thing that needs to be understood about the modern tech industry, it's just that it doesn't quietly apologize for a mistake and goes back to making like good products. That's just not how it works now. When a massive tech bubble pops, things unfortunately don't get better. In fact, they usually do get worse. And while I play Minecraft, I want to talk about, what comes next when this AI slot bubble pops. So first of all, let's lay out the facts here. So for the last few years, like since I guess like 2022, like when it truly riz, like we've been living through the generative AI hype cycle. Like Microsoft, Google, Meta, and every venture capital firm in Silicon Valley has been like dumping hundreds of billions of dollars into AI. Like they bought up every single GPU they could, possibly get their grubby hands on. Built these massive data centers across the US especially, and promised investors that, this was the next, big thing, the next industrial revolution. Like they told us that AI was going to, automate coding, revolutionize medicine, like do all sorts of crazy things, like basically do all our tasks so we can be lazy as humans. But what did we actually get today? Well, we got a chatbot, chatbots that often hallucinate and lie to you. Google search, generating, I guess, like garbage at the top of the page. And, Windows 11 adding, a dedicated, Copilot key to keyboards that nobody asked for, alongside, all sorts of environmental and electricity issues and also ethical issues as well. So, in short, we got AI slop. Like that technology AI, it's impressive in a vacuum, sure, but as a consumer product, I feel like the novelty wears off after around, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes. And the thing is that Wall Street is finally waking up to this reality. Like the revenue is not matching the server costs and also the income being generated. Like you can't just spend billions training a language model just so that I know like high school students can use it to write their essays. Like the math does not math. Like there's not a good return there. So the bubble is bursting and the funding is unfortunately drying up, and the AI era as a hype machine is starting to come to an end. And that's crazy. But here's the thing, like what happens to all the software and all the AI stuff that we're stuck with right now? Like let's take a look at Windows 11 for example. I made a lot of videos about that. So Microsoft has spent the last, I would say, 1 to 2 years desperately trying to, bake AI into every single corner of the OS. Like, Copilot in the taskbar, the recall stuff, that whole shenanigans, like putting AI into, paint, the notepad settings. Like, the OS is, to be quite frank, like bloated with code that relies on, AI. So here's the thing, like when Microsoft, shifts their focus away from AI, like they're already trying to do that because the investors are, demanding, actual profit margins and like lower server costs. Like they're not going to just, go back and, remove all that Copilot integration on Windows. No, no, no. That costs money and also developer time. Instead, it's just going to become, dead code. It's going to be like abandoned, baked directly into your OS. Like we're going to be left with a version of Windows 11 that has broken buttons, bloated background processes, and just, a lot worse experience. Like, you think that Windows 11 is a resource hog now? Like, just wait until, like, a lot of the core marketing features are just defunded and just, like, abandoned, getting all buggy. Like, it's going to be, like, an absolute nightmare for system stability. And, speaking of this, let's bring to the next point that I have, which is the historical pattern of the tech grift. You see, big tech companies, they are required to, bring growth to their shareholders, bring profits. Like they cannot just say, like, hey, we made something very solid, let's just keep it like that, get a steady income stream. No, 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 because Wall Street, they do not like that. They want a narrative. They want, money. Like they want new world-changing technology every 3 to 4 years, just try to justify their stock valuations. Like Nvidia, for example, like they're the epitome of that right now. So let's just look at the timeline so far. So back in 2021, 2022, the whole, shebang was crypto, Web3, blockchain, all of that. Like every single tech company was talking about the blockchain. But then the crypto market crashed. But, did tech companies go back to making actually good software? Nope, that did not happen. Instead, the narrative shifted to the metaverse. That was a whole big thing. Like Facebook, they literally changed their entire company name to Meta, and I know Roblox, they try to make that their whole central focus around like their platform. Microsoft bought VR companies who were all supposed to be wearing headsets and attending like virtual meetings as avatars. But then everyone realized that the metaverse sucked, and big Mark Zuckerberg, he just stopped talking about it. So then what happened after this? Well, they panicked, looked around, and grabbed onto generative AI. ChatGPT came out, and suddenly every CEO was now an AI visionary. Like, it is a cycle of pivoting to the next shiny thing. And if the AI bubble is popping right now, which most likely is, the executives at Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're all having their closed door meetings. Like, they're trying to, find out what the next grift is going to be, because they need to sell a dream to Wall Street by next quarter, or they might be cooked. So what is the next grift going to be? Well, honestly, I don't know what's going to be. I can't say for sure, but I guess I can make an educated guess. Like, I think it might be something around like spatial computing, or I don't know, ambient technology. And I say this because of the whole thing with Apple and the Vision Pro. Like, that made headwaves when it first came out, but people realized it was way too expensive. But yes, it kind of worked, because maybe Microsoft and Google, they'll start talking about some, I don't know, seamless ambient integration, that the idea that your devices are constantly talking and listening to each other. Like, maybe they'll try to rebrand all these AI agents as something else, like, I don't know, insane automation, hyper automation, or some other buzzword. Like, I really do not know at this point. Or maybe they'll swing entirely in a different direction. Like, since they just spent billions building data centers for AI, they need to rent out that computing power somehow. So maybe we'll see a push for cloud only computing. Like, I don't know. Like, think about it. Like, Microsoft and these tech companies, like, subscriptions, they're making like a big rise. Like HP, like, they're having subscription laptops now. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, what if the next grift is just convincing everyone that local hardware is dead? Like, they might start pushing that you don't need a powerful CPU or GPU anymore, and that you just need, I don't know, a cheap, I don't know, terminal laptop, and stream your entire OS from a company for like a subscription fee, of course. Like, maybe it's like the ultimate dream for these companies, that you owe nothing. You rent your computing power, and they get a guaranteed revenue stream forever, because a computer, once you buy it, it's a one-time purchase, and now with subscriptions, they want constant revenue. So while I play Minecraft and all that, I want to talk about also like the hardware side of this, because I feel like with this AI bubble bursting, it's gonna be like a disaster. Because during the AI boom, hardware companies like Nvidia became the most valuable companies on the planet. Like, Nvidia's worth a ton of money. It's like the most valuable tech company in the world, like the most valuable company in the entire world. Like, everyone was buying up their enterprise chips, but what happens to the consumer market? So it's already been some effects. So for the last 3 years, consumers have been paying for an AI tax on hardware. Like, GPUs have been insanely overpriced, because Nvidia knows they can just charge whatever they want. And if gamers don't buy it, the AI startups, they're going to snatch it all up. But when the AI startups go bankrupt, and a lot of them will go bankrupt because they don't have an actual business model, the hardware market is going to experience like a massive whiplash. Like, we might see a flood of used, heavily degraded, enterprise GPUs hit the secondhand market, completely wrecking the pricing structure. So, on one hand, I think the first thought would be like, yo, great, cheap GPUs for PC builders, for gamers, like, that's one thing. But on the other hand, Nvidia and AMD, they're not going to accept those lower profits. Like, if they can't sell, 40K, costing chips to AI data centers anymore, they're going to try and find a way to squeeze that revenue onto regular customers. Like, we might see, aggressive price gouging on, mid-tier GPUs, I guess like software lockouts, and just forced obsolescence just to keep those margins up when the AI bubble crashes. Like, the tech industry has spent, the last like half decade doing like a massive financial speed run, and regular users are the one who have to be dealt with the hangover. Like, we're going to be left navigating a tech world that's just littered with the corpses of failed AI features. Like, I think Google search is going to remain like permanently like cooked, optimized for like bots than humans. Windows will carry the scar of Copilot integration that you can't fully get rid of. And then the internet itself is going to, remain flooded with the AI generated slop that was pumped out during the peak of this bubble. Like, it's just like, it's like that one term, like enshittification. Yes, that term. Like, it perfectly describes what we're living through. Like, platforms are good to attract users, then they, abuse users to get those business customers, and finally they abuse those business customers to claw back every single cent of profit from themselves until the platform eventually meet its maker. So yeah, the AI era was a massive acceleration for its type of process. Like the big tech companies, they burned through the goodwill of their users to chase an AI dream that didn't exactly seem to pan out. And now that the reality trying to set in, they're trying to clean up the mess, and instead of probably cleaning up, they're gonna look for the next room to trash. So yeah, that's my rant for today about the whole the aftermath of this AI slop crash. And honestly, it's pretty infuriating. If you have anything to tell me, let me know in the comments. And yeah, I'll see you next time. And once again, thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to make a special video for that soon, like maybe like a Q&A. But yeah, I'll see you next time.